Where will the New York Giants brass aim to upgrade the team this offseason? We're going to talk about it next on Locked On Giants, starting now.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, now the #1 sports podcast network in America. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, credential member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for New York Giants on SI, which is where you can find all of our written work. And as always, welcome to our everydayer club members, to our Blue Crew community members, to our newcomers, and everybody in between. Thank you so much for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. And today's episode of Locked On Giants is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. FanDuel is officially in playoff mode. Every game day during the NFL playoffs, FanDuel is giving customers even more ways to get in on the action. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, Giant fans, on today's Friday episode of Locked On Giants, we're going to take a look at where the Giants' focus for the offseason is probably going to lie the heaviest. And it's probably not what you think. So we'll take a look at it and we'll discuss why that area is probably going to be looked at heavily. Then in segment 2, we'll talk about a secret need that this team has. Now, I don't think a lot of people are discussing it. I'm thinking long-term for this particular need. And actually long-term, when I say that, it could be a year, could be 2 years down the line. But I think this is a need that the team will address at some point, probably in the draft or maybe even post-draft, I would think. So that's what we'll discuss in segment 2. And then in segment 3, there's been a lot of hand-wringing I've seen from fans about the offensive line now that Carmen Bricillo has gone to the Tennessee Titans to join Brian Daboll, the new offensive coordinator down there. I'm going to tell you why I'm not as concerned about that loss. And to be clear, I didn't like losing Bricillo, but I don't think it is as catastrophic as maybe some people think it might be. So that's what we're going to cover on today's show. Again, welcome to everybody. All right, let's talk about the New York Giants offseason. Now, obviously, right now the focus is on getting the coaching staff in place. And as of right now, we still don't know who the offensive coordinator is going to be. And that is a major, major hire. I don't have to tell you guys and gals that. And if you look at some of the candidates who have been linked to the position, all right, Jim Bob Cooter is one. Alex Tanney was just added just before I started recording. Davis Webb. They all have one thing in common. They were all at some point or another quarterbacks. Cooter was a quarterback in college. All right. I don't think he made it to the NFL as a pro quarterback. Tanney and Davis Webb were both NFL quarterbacks. So what does that tell us? That tells us, folks, that there was a big, big push on developing the offense. Now, the Giants offense in 2025 wasn't all that bad if you consider, no Malik Neighbors for most of the season, Cam Scatteraboo injured, Andrew Thomas missed a few games here and there. It wasn't that bad. So the focus, I suspect, there's going to be a heavy focus placed on the offensive side of the ball, and not just on one specific position, but across the board. So let's talk about it. Okay, wide receiver. We can all probably agree that outside of Wan'Dale Robinson, the Giants receivers last year after Malik Neighbors went down with an injury, that group was not very inspiring. Too many drop passes, poorly run routes, just not inspiring at all. So you got to think that a top need is going to be a receiver, getting another receiver, preferably an outside guy, who can take some of the onus off of Malik Neighbors. Now, for those of you saying, well, what about Wan'Dale Robinson and bringing him back? I would not be against that. But that being said, Wan'Dale's going to get paid. All right. Now, do I think he's going to get paid by the Giants? I'm not so sure that's going to happen. All right. I go back to something that Joe Schoen talked about in his after his first season as GM, when I think at the time everybody, including myself, was saying, "Oh, the Giants have got to go out in free agency. They got to get a receiver." They went via the draft. The idea being, okay, we get a kid in here, you know, and put him on a rookie contract. And at the time, the quarterback, Daniel Jones, was still on a rookie deal. There's an advantage to going to the draft to get a receiver and maybe letting Wan'Dale walk. And again, I don't want to see Wan'Dale go, but I can see the business side of it. The advantage is now you're going to have most of your offense on rookie deals, right? So Dart is on a rookie deal. You're going to have Theo Johnson on a rookie deal, Cam Scatterboo, Tyrone Tracy Jr., Malik Neighbors is on his rookie deal. And then up front, John Michael Schmitz. And if they go with Marcus Bowe as a starter, he's going to be on a rookie deal. So that's most of the starting offense, or the projected starting offense, that will be on a rookie deal. So now you can take the money that you are going to save and pour it into filling some of the premium holes on defense. Cornerback, maybe get another linebacker in here. If you want to add another, defensive lineman, you can really focus on that, on that area. All right. So I mentioned receiver as being, a need. The theme here is build around Jackson Dart. And that's what I believe the Giants are going to do in the offseason. That's where their focus is going to be. So I mentioned receiver. Obviously, tight end is going to be a need because Chris Manhertz, Daniel Bellinger, both set to hit free agency. Now, I would like to see Daniel Bellinger back. Daniel Bellinger plays a lot of different positions on the offense and very underrated as a pass catcher. The only thing that I'm wondering, though, is will the Giants, now that they have John Harbaugh as their head coach, will they deploy a full-time fullback? I'm thinking Patrick Ricard of the Ravens. Will they try and maybe bring him up? At which point now maybe that lessens a little bit the need for the tight end, or at least for a guy who's a blocker. Now maybe you can shift the focus and say, okay, instead of getting another blocker, now maybe, we can get away with a receiving tight end and maybe go in a different direction. Either way, I think if they go that route, it probably means Chris Manhertz will not be back. I'd be surprised if he is, even though I don't think he would cost a whole lot. Bellinger, I'd like to see back, but I have a feeling they might move on from him. I hope I'm wrong. Just a gut feeling that I have. All right. Running back, they should be fairly set once Scatterboo comes back. Tyrone Tracy will be back. I think they move on from Devin Singletary and they maybe try a younger player there, whether it be Dante Miller or maybe they draft somebody, I don't know. But they should be set there at running back now. The other place you want to build up is you want to continue to stock the offensive line. I suspect Jermaine Illuminor will not be back. Right? I think Jermaine Illuminor is probably going to see, if he gets an offer to go to Tennessee to be with Carmen Bricillo, I think he takes that if the money is right. So in that instance, potentially I could see Marcus Bowe stepping in as the starting right tackle. That pretty much then, to me, says, okay, keep this line intact. Illuminor moves on, and then it's just, what do they do at right guard? Do they bring back Van Roten for another year? I mean, he should be relatively inexpensive. Or do they go with the youth movement? Regardless, you've got to have young guys in the cupboard. You've got to be developing guys in case there's injuries or in case, guys move on in free agency. Now, some of you have asked me, well, what about Tyler Linderbaum? Would the Giants go for him? I'm not sure they would. Would Tyler Linderbaum be a upgrade over John Michael Schmitz? Absolutely. But again, you've got Schmitz still on his rookie deal. And I don't know that they would make that move. I think it would come down, obviously it would come down to money, but Schmitz was not that bad this past year. I don't think he gets enough credit for having developed a little bit better than he has been. So Linderbaum would be great, but I don't know if they would make that kind of investment. So unlike, the assistant coaches where Harbaugh has a bottomless budget, you don't have a bottomless budget when it comes to players. So I'm not sure. I think Linderbaum might be a luxury that the Giants probably are not going to invest in. So the bottom line, like I said, folks, is this is all going to be about building around Jackson Dart. That's going to probably be the offseason focus, the offseason theme. Yes, the defense needs pieces, but I think the offense is going to get the most love, if you will, this offseason when they get into the roster building process. All right, coming up next, the Giants have a secret need that really not a lot of people are talking about. I'm going to talk about it right after this. Hey, Giant fans, tax season doesn't have to take over your life. This year, TurboTax is making it easier than ever just to hand things off and move on with your day. With TurboTax full service, you can have your taxes done for you by a trusted local expert, start to finish, without the stress or the guesswork. Instead of spending hours trying to figure out forms, you can meet with a local TurboTax expert in person or connect online. They handle everything from W-2s to self-employed forms and work with you to get every deduction. You can upload your documents, go about your day, and get updates right in the TurboTax app. It's a huge time saver and gives real peace of mind knowing that an expert is handling it. For a limited time, you can have your taxes done by a local TurboTax expert for just $150, all in, if a TurboTax expert didn't file for you last year. Just file by February 28th and take taxes off your plate and get back to your life. Visit turbotax.com/local to book your appointment today. Hey, Giant fans, it's the last call for football on FanDuel. One final Sunday, one last kickoff, the final chance to get in on the action before the NFL season officially comes to a close. This is Super Bowl 60, and FanDuel is making sure that you're right in the middle of it with a special offer just in time for the biggest game of the year. Whether you're backing the favorite, riding with the underdog, or building one last same-game parlay, this is the game everybody's been waiting for. This is where predictions turn into plays, stats turn into storylines, and every snap feels bigger. It's the perfect way to cap off the season and make the Super Bowl even more exciting from kickoff to the final whistle. If you're a new customer, bet just $5 and get $200 in bonus bets if you win. So make it count because after the Super Bowl, the NFL season is over. Last call for football on FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of Super Bowl 60. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to Locked On Giants. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, and we talked about needs in the last segment, and there's a secret need, at least one that I think the Giants have, that really not a whole lot of people are talking about, but I'm going to talk about it now, and this might surprise you. You might say, nah, they don't need this right now, or what are you thinking? But just hear me out on this, all right? So the secret need that I think nobody's talking about that the Giants might want to address is to get a young developmental quarterback. Now you're probably saying, okay, hey, Pat, they've got Jackson Dart. He's young, all right, but he's not a developmental guy necessarily. He is their starter. I mean, he's going to be developed, but it's not like, he's coming in and you hope that he's going to develop, all right? He's kind of, been on the right track. I'm talking about a potential backup down the line because, listen, as much as I appreciate Jameis Winston, you guys know that I think that he's a national treasure. Ultimately, he's going to move on. All right. Jameis Winston's trying to launch a career in media in the offseason in his spare time. He's not going to be with the Giants forever. So when he goes, then what? Now is the time, in my opinion, to get a young developmental quarterback, somebody that you can develop who's going to learn the offensive system the same as everybody else, so somebody that Jackson Dart can build rapport with, and just know that that person might be there if anything were to happen, to Jackson Dart where he couldn't play, and if Jameis Winston isn't on the roster. So, that's a need that I don't think a lot of people are talking about. Now, obviously, folks, I don't think the Giants should draft one. They don't have a ton of draft picks. They only have 7, actually, I think, going into this year's draft, unless they make a trade, right? They're not projected to get any comp picks, obviously. So I would say maybe pick up somebody post-draft and see if you can't start developing them. See if they might be somebody who down the line, even if you stash that person on the practice squad, see if that's somebody who down the line can't step in and be more of a backup, if you will, to Jackson Dart down the line. That's something I think the Giants need to do. I mean, they've gotten away from that, to be honest with you. They didn't really have that last year because, they had Russell Wilson on the roster, Jameis Winston, Jackson Dart. They had 2 veterans. And they, did that purposely because last offseason, they weren't sure if they were going to be able to draft the quarterback, if the guy that they wanted was going to be there. It just so happens that they had to trade up to get their guy. So I think the Giants moving forward will probably go back to adding another, young developmental quarterback and see if that guy maybe can't become the backup, the QB2 to Jackson Dart. And again, it would be a great setup because once you get the coaching staff in place, the offensive coordinator, the quarterback's coach, the passing game coordinator, they're all going to work with Jackson Dart to get him to the next level. So why not kill 2 birds with 1 stone and bring on a young quarterback? Because look, even if that young quarterback never plays, and if he never plays, it's because Jackson Dart is healthy, which I'm sure we all want. If you develop him and he puts some good preseason film together, maybe down the line you can trade him for assets. So to me, I think that makes a lot of sense. It's something the Giants, like I said, they haven't really done since Tommy DeVito. And we all saw how successful, that was for a little bit, better than I think a lot of us thought it would be. So I think the Giants really need to go back to that and get a young developmental quarterback who can grow with Jackson Dart. And you've got Jameis Winston for this year. Contrary to, I think, what a lot of people might think, Giants aren't trading Jameis Winston. He's going to be on this roster, barring, some weird circumstance popping up. Jameis is a good mentor. It was one of the reasons why last offseason I was banging the drum for him. I think he's going to be a good mentor and, not just to Jackson Dart, but also to a potential young quarterback that I think maybe they pick up after the draft. I would not waste a draft pick on a quarterback. They just, they have other needs they have to address. And I just don't see that. If they had extra draft picks, then I could see maybe picking a day 3 quarterback, but that is not the case. So we'll see if, John Harbaugh agrees. I don't know off the top of my head if they've done that a lot in Baltimore when he was there. I know a lot of, there are teams that take that route. The Giants last year did not. We'll see if that changes moving forward. All right, Giant fans, coming up next, there's some panic about the offensive line, especially after Carmen Bricillo left for Tennessee. I'm going to tell you why that might not be as big of a deal as we think. Hey, Giant fans, if you've ever hired someone who looked good on paper but wasn't the right fit, you know how that can set you back. When you want candidates who truly match what you're looking for, trust Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Indeed Sponsored Jobs puts your post at the top of the page and helps you reach the right candidates faster. According to Indeed data, Sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed are 90% more likely to report a hire than non-sponsored jobs. Spend more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes and deal with less stress and less time with Indeed sponsored jobs. Listeners of this show get a $75 sponsored job credit to help give their job opening the premium placement it deserves at Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL. Terms and conditions apply. So if you're hiring, do it the right way with Indeed. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to Locked On Giants. I'm Patricia Traina, and thank you so much for making Locked On Giants part of your day. And thank you for making the Locked On Network the #1 sports podcast network. If you're a true diehard New York Giants fan, check out our everyday or all access level. You'll get one-on-one text access with me, all access episodes, an exclusive daily newsletter, a 15% discount to the Locked On merch store, regular video calls with me, and a whole lot more. Head on over to LockedOnNYGiants.supercast.com to join the Everydayer program and unlock all access. You can also find the link in our show notes. All right, Giant fans, segment 3 on deck here. And, look, I was one of the people who really, really hoped that Carmen Bricillo, the offensive line coach, would be back. And from what I understand, there was kind of a split decision in the front office. All right. Obviously, John Harbaugh is going to have final say over his coaching staff, but it was recommended by more than one person in the front office, from what I understand, that they consider keeping Bricillo, if for no other reason, for continuity purposes. That said, usually the offensive coordinator and the offensive line coach, there's some kind of synergy that goes on between the two. And the thinking was, I guess at the time, well, if we're going to bring on Todd Monken as our offensive coordinator, then George Warhop is going to be the offensive line coach. I think that is what they originally wanted to do. We all know that didn't work out. Monken became the head coach at Cleveland. Warhop went with him to the Browns. Right? So now the Giants, in the meantime, Bricillo, who they basically, who they had under contract, they basically said to him, okay, well, we're trying to figure this out. We're not going to put you on ice. If you want to go out and see if there's other jobs that maybe you're interested in, go right ahead. So what happened? Bricillo went with Brian Daboll to Tennessee. Daboll, the offensive coordinator. And there's some kind of, relationship where the offensive coordinator wants a certain, I guess, style or, coaching technique or whatever for their offensive line. And it was just, the second Daboll got hired down in Tennessee, I said, Bricillo's definitely going down there. There's no way, even after if the Monken decision was made, there was just no way he was going to stay. All right, so does that mean we should panic? Because look, Carmen Bricillo did a really good job with the offensive line. He helped John Michael Schmitz take a significant leap. Andrew Thomas, when he returned, played very well. Marcus Bowe, who was a 5th-round pick, who you figure, he's probably going to need a full year of development. When he stepped in, he was okay. Jermaine Illuminor had a career year as far as allowing the fewest pressures in his career since becoming a full-time starter. So a lot of people are like, oh, gosh, Bricillo's not back. What does that mean for the offensive line? I don't want to take away the Bricillo factor, but here's why I'm not as, I guess, concerned about the offensive line right now. And that is the continuity factor. Now, in all likelihood, you're going to have Andrew Thomas back. You're going to have John Runyon Jr. back. I do think he'll be back. I'd be surprised if he becomes a cap hit. You're going to have John Michael Schmitz back. I do not think Illuminor will be back. I think he may go to Tennessee if they offer him a deal. Or, he's going to want money. And I don't know that the Giants are going to be willing to pay him big bucks. They should, but I don't think that they will be willing to. Greg Van Roten, you could probably get back for another year on a relatively inexpensive deal. which means, okay, best case scenario, you have 4 of your 5 starters from last year. Now, if you go under the assumption that Marcus Bowe was all along planned that he become the starting right tackle, this is a guy who worked with the starting lineup, all right, and did a pretty decent job. Not all-star or all-pro by any stretch of the imagination, but the game was never too big for him. The number one thing with an offensive line is continuity. Now, will a new offensive line coach come in here and maybe tweak some technique and some, philosophies and stuff? Yeah, you get that no matter what. Will it be catastrophic to where these guys now all of a sudden have to learn from scratch? I don't think so. I think ultimately, the Giants, the approach to stock up on veterans helped. It gave them a jump start on the offensive line. But as I said in the first segment, it's time to start adding some more young depth to that unit, because ultimately you want to have guys in reserve who are homegrown, who can step in if there is an injury or if somebody leaves in free agency. And the Giants really don't have that right now. I mean, Evan Neal's not going to be back. I doubt Joshua Ezeudu is going to be back. Maybe they bring back Aaron Stinney, but, Stinney is a veteran. Where's the developmental guys? I mean, I'm of the opinion you add an offensive lineman every year because you can never have enough of them. And we've seen that so many times before. And, oh, by the way, who's going to be the swing tackle if, as I suspect, Marcus Bowe becomes the starting right tackle? Who's the swing tackle? It's not going to be James Hudson. I don't think I think he's going to be a salary cap cut. So who's your swing tackle? So overall, yeah, I'm not that upset or that concerned about the offensive line. Now, maybe that changes once I see them on the field and I see, what the differences are. But right now, I just have my feeling is that, yeah, it would have been nice to have kept Carmen Bricillo and James Ferenz for that matter. But I just don't think it's as catastrophic as some people on my X account timeline have made it out to be. Only time will tell, obviously. But I'm optimistic about it, So, that being said, that's going to do it for this edition of the Locked On Giants podcast. As always, thank you for tuning in, spending part of your day with us here. This weekend, I believe, is the Pro Bowl. Not that I plan on tuning in for that. I don't know how many of you are planning to watch it. And then next week, the final week of the NFL 2025 season, we've got the Super Bowl. The Giants, of course, not in it, unfortunately. Maybe one day soon they will be. But it's the final week of football. And just like that, the season has come to an end. But even though the season has come to an end, we will still be here 5 days a week for you on the Locked On Giants podcast as we continue to track coach hirings, roster moves, scouting, a whole bunch of other stuff. So hope you will stay with us all off season long. All right, Giant fans, have a great weekend, and I'll see you on Monday with an all-new episode of Locked On Giants.